To Nick and Malcolm, boy, what a congratulations to you all. And I would say this to both of you individually and personally, you are signs of hope. You are signs of hope not only in your families and your communities, but in this country as well. And the function of hope is to always keep present realities open for future possibility. We live in a nation with tremendous numbers of people that need to know that tomorrow can be different than today. Boy, and you represent hope in moving this country, your communities to a more fair and just position. So congratulations to you. And then to Brennan and Leo, boy, what a terrific job you both are doing. I was thinking about the three themes you have of men, mentoring, and sports, and how integrated those are. The reality is this: when you think about sports, sports will engage more individuals, more families, more community in a shared activity than any cultural activity, organization, or religion in this country. It has become the secular religion of America. And the high priest of that religion is a coach. And coaches have this almost unparalleled platform, power, and position to either speak into the lives of young people and transmit positive values, or to somehow marginalize and minimalize them. And the crisis really is, the crisis is really a crisis of masculinity. So I thought I'd talk about that tonight. And let me just tell you two things about me before I begin. One, I'm a product of the 1960s. So I was in college and high school right at the convergence of the civil rights movement, of the women's rights movement, and the whole war on poverty. I think as a nation we started to ask all the right questions about what is the role of race and class and gender, as it speaks to the inherent value and worth of every human being. And I think 40 years later, we still haven't quite answered those questions. So I've been working on social issues both in the church, on the street, and in the world of sports. And that reminds me, if you got a cell phone, make sure that thing is turned off or on vibrate. I'll tell you a true story. I was preaching on a Martin Luther King Sunday. And I was speaking about racism in America. Racism is part of America's original sin. Our nation was built on the genocide of one group of people and the enslavement of another. And while we've come a long way in the past 400 years, there is still disparity and disproportionality in almost every category of well-being when it comes to racial issues. And I spent 30 minutes on this sermon, and you could hear a pin drop in this congregation as everybody did their own work with their enculturation in a racist society. And suddenly, true story, somebody sitting over here, their cell phone went off and was set to the song, play that funky music, White Boy, and like crushed 30 minutes of setup. So if we get to one of those moments, don't be you be that person tonight. Second thing about me, I had played, as Todd said, professional football for 13 years, and the thing that I was able to take out of that game into my own life and vocation and calling is this concept of a team. And really it's the concept of a community. Now what you have in the NFL every year is you have 53 men. 53 men that come together every summer from all four corners of this nation. And they tend to be white men and black men and brown men. They come out of the inner cities, the suburbs, the farmlands of America. And every year they create this community called a team. And you learn that if you're going to be an asset to the community, what you really have to do is set aside your own personal goals, wants, and longings. How do you seek the highest values for the greatest common good? You have to find your well-being and the well-being of all of your teammates. And to me, that's the challenge facing us in America. I'm sure it's a challenge facing you in Pittsburgh. Boy, how do we come together? How do you cross old racial, social, economic, religious, geographical divisions to create a community, a country, where every man and woman has the opportunity to live with the dignity and the status that God has assigned to them? How do you come together and create a community where every boy and girl is given maximum opportunity to reach his or her greatest human potential? And no child in 2011 in America should the geography of where they're born ever dictate their destiny. Boy, we've got to create a more fair and just society. And that's called building out God's kingdom. which is built on God's love and acceptance for all people, his standards of righteousness, and his demand for justice. Now, when I had retired from football, I'd also gone to seminary in my off seasons, and my wife and I moved into one of the poorest census tracts in Baltimore, Maryland. Started working on street level kinds of issues of mercy. Food and shelter, dealt with evictions, created after-school programs for children that were locked in systems that didn't have the access or the resource to allow them to maximize their potential. And then saw, that ghettos in America were man-made. They were constructed to deny people access, opportunity. And if they were man-constructed, therefore they could be deconstructed. So spent years working on systemic racism and poverty and housing and economic development and a host of issues. And I was 4 or 5 years into my work when it suddenly dawned on me, there's an even greater crisis in this country. There's a crisis in America that's foundational to just about every social problem we have. And if you don't address this issue, you'll never be able to deal with the psychosocial, spiritual problems all over this country. And to me, the single greatest crisis in America today is the crisis of masculinity. It's a crisis about what does it mean to be a man? How does a boy know when he's become a man? What's a man give his life to? What's the values, what's the virtues that describe some kind of authentic masculinity? And I would ask every man in here, in your own mind, how do you define masculinity? How do you define what it means to be a man? What's the definition that's going to guide our own masculine souls as we move through this community? What's that clear and compelling definition that we're going to give to this next generation of boys to help them become men that are going to be citizens, devoted fathers, committed husbands, and contributors to this society? So what does it mean to be a man? I would take a few moments to just kind of talk about that and then give you my definition of masculinity. I want to say this. I think the 3 scariest words that every man receives in his lifetime is when he's a boy and someone tells him to be a man. And I'd ask every man in here, you think about the context when you were young, when someone told you to be a man. It was almost always in the context of stop acting that way. Stop with those emotions, stop those tears, stop those feelings, be a man. And what most of us were taught as young boys, that in order to fill some kind of cultural definition of masculinity, we had to separate our hearts from our head and try to live a masculinity kind of from the neck up. Boy, it's this disconnection from the heart and the head that creates the social problems. And I don't care whether you're talking about boys with guns or girls with babies or immorality in boardrooms all over this country or the beatdown women take in America. It comes back to this issue of masculinity and men disassociating from the very essence and the source of life and all meaning, our hearts. So I think every boy in America is fed 3 fundamental lies about what it means to be a man. Now, they're the same lies that were fed to me when I was a boy that are fed to boys today. And they come out of this culture. Now, when I talk about culture, I'm talking about the messages that come from the movies, the media, the marketing, Madison Ave 24/7. Boy, you think about the misplaced values and messages about masculinity that come out of the whole world of sports and all the sports nexus and advertising. First lie is this, and every boy in America learns this by the time they're 8 and 9 years old. They learn this on ball fields and playgrounds and during recess all over our community. And the first lie is this. Boys are taught that what it means to be a man has something to do with athletic ability. Somehow we associate it with size or strength or some kind of skill set that allows you to compete on that playground and win. So what happens to a number of boys in this country? Those boys that can catch it down and out or hit the hanging curve, those boys in this culture are elevated. They're seen as having more value, more worth. those boys are ascribed a little more masculinity. And I would say those boys are set up for a tremendous failure and frustration in life. Being a man doesn't have a single thing to do with athletic ability, size, or strength, and the capacity to compete and win. But you think about all of the boys on that planet. Boys are created not just to play sports. They have interest in music and dance and drama, debate, and they ought to have the freedom to be whatever they were created to be. But in this culture, those boys, 8 years old, they're pushed to the periphery of this playground and impregnated with this idea that somehow they don't have what it takes to be a man based on the first lie. Second lie is this, and every boy in America learns this by the time they're junior high school today. That is, as a culture, movies, media, magazines, medicine, we teach young boys that what it means to be a man has something to do with issues of sexual conduct. What does it mean to be a man in this culture? It means you have the capacity to bring some young girl alongside of yourself and then use her. Use her to either gratify some kind of physical need or use her to validate some kind of masculine insecurity. That certainly doesn't make you a man. That makes you a user of other human beings. And then later on you get the third lie in this culture. And that is, as a nation, we associate masculinity with issues of economic success. As though you can measure what a man is based by his job title, his position, his power, or the amount of possessions someone has as a human. Boy, that too is a fundamental lie. So here's the problem. We've got all these boys growing up in America with no clear, compelling definition of what it means to be a man. Many of them haven't seen it modeled, they haven't been nurtured, and they haven't been trained toward becoming a man. So you know who ends up becoming the epitome, the role model of masculinity in America today? And remember, a role model is someone you model your behavior after. It's the professional athlete. Why? Not because we taught young people to evaluate their character, how they're leveraging their platform for the betterment of their family and other people, but because they have athletic ability, they compete against other men and women, they have opportunities for sexual conquest and economic success. Boy, there's a crisis in this country. And see what happens with that social mandate to be a man? It produces a thing called alexithymia. Alexithymia. That's a mental health designation. That's a Latin word. A means without, lex means words, and thymia is emotions and feelings. It's an inability to put your emotions and feelings into words. The American Psychological Association would say 80% of American men suffer from some form of alexithymia. Where does it come from? It comes from the fact that when we were young boys, we were taught that to have emotions, to share them, to show them, to express them, somehow those things were considered signs of masculine failure. So we repress, we deny, we ignore all of our feelings and emotions, not even giving them permission to use the word to be able to describe what we're feeling. And here's where the crisis begins. Because as a man, if you don't understand your own emotions, you don't understand your own feelings, you'll never be able to understand how your words and actions impact other human beings. Boy, the key to understanding others is to understand self. You have this empathy deficit disorder in America. It comes from a lack of self-knowledge and self-awareness. Boy, that's foundation. That lack of empathy produces bullying, which produces dating abuse, which produces gender violence, which produces violence all over this country. And it ends up creating kind of a masculine covert depression. It's different than clinical depression. Boy, you're not pinned to a bed. All you see are the three footprints of this masculine depression. The first footprint is this: the tremendous number of men that live in isolation, have no meaningful relationship with other people. And to be alone as a man in this society, without ever revealing, expressing, well, that's a dangerous place to be. And it speaks to the work that Whitefield is doing. Because all of us as men, we need some sense of community. And the problem is we were always taught how to compare and compete, which almost always destroys the opportunity to enter into a meaningful relationship. And if I were to go around the room, and I know this from doing this work for a long time, and I would ask men in here, why is it you have no meaningful relationship in your life? Men would tell me two fundamental reasons. One, I don't know how to have friends, and two, I don't have time. And I would say it's a much deeper issue than that. Because what you really value, you learn how to do, and you make the time to do it. Anybody that plays golf proves that there. It's really about value. Second thing you see in this footprint is this tremendous amount of substance abuse. See, I don't think there's anything more painful in life than feeling like you don't quite measure up as a man. And given the cultural definitions, you'll never have a long enough athletic career, you'll never sleep with enough women or make enough money to ever feel satisfied and fulfilled by that definition. So what men do is they start medicating the pain of that. Drugs, alcohol, sex, materialism, pornography, whatever you need to attach to in order to feel more masculine, more manly in the midst of our insecurities. Boy, that leads to the third footprint, which is the violence in this country. You look at the tremendous number of men walking around with this fever, this low-grade fever of anger and resentment that just spikes periodically. You know, we're the most violent nation in the world. We're 4% of the world population in America, and yet 25% of all incarcerated people in the world are in this country. Men have been using violence to get over in life for decades and generations. But you think about violence toward girls and women in this country. You know, the most dangerous place for a woman in America today, it isn't to be on the street after midnight. It's in her home. And we'll have somewhere between 1 and 3 million women that are going to be physically and or sexually abused by intimate partners alone. We live in a nation where we'll have over 650,000 rapes reported, one every 40 seconds. And everybody that works in the field agrees those are underreported by almost 5 to 6 to 1. 1 out of 5 teenage dating relationships involve some kind of physical and or sexual force. Boy, what we've done is created generations of men that think they can use their size, their strength, their power, their position to hurt, control, and manipulate girls and women in this country. And here's the reality. There's only a small minority of men that actually hurt girls and women. The problem is the vast majority of men are silent to the beatdown women take and therefore complicit. Boy, women can't end gender violence. It's not going to end to a generation of men learn how to stand up and show and speak out and call each other out on behalf of our wives, our daughters, and the women in our lives. Boy, we need to raise up this generation. Boy, it's what Whitefield is doing. Taking a whole generation of men, teaching them how to connect and relate, understand who and what they are in the image of God, and then permeate that down through mentoring, through coaching, into the rest of this society. Boy, it's a sign of hope. Things as they are today don't need to be this way tomorrow. But it's not enough. It's not enough to be a good man. You've got to be an involved man in this society. So here's the question. If those are the lies of masculinity, then what does it mean to be a man? How do you define that? Let me give you my definition of masculinity, and I think it comes down to 2 criteria and 2 criteria alone. And it happens to be the same definition for women as well. I was in my 7th year of professional football, playing with the Colts, and my mother and grandmother raised 4 children in Buffalo, New York. 2 sisters and a brother 10 years younger than me. Not having a father in the house, I raised him not only as my brother, but really as a son. When he was 5, I was 15, somebody to be reckoned with in our community. And I taught him what I knew about being a man. Athletic ability, sexual conquest, and the way out of our neighborhood to the money was through sports. And he had the same pathological drive I had. trying to validate a sense of worth, a sense of our humanity based on some kind of performance. And he had just graduated from high school, getting ready to go to college for his freshman year. And I got him a job that summer in training camp with the Colts. I wanted him to come in and learn the work ethic of a professional athlete, the skills and techniques of a defensive lineman, hopefully ensuring his collegiate success, and then he would follow me into the NFL. It was the very first week of training camp of the middle of July. I'm sitting on a taping table getting my ankles taped for an afternoon practice when my brother Billy walked up to me and had this massive black and blue mark on his chest. Our trainer saw that, sent him to the doctors for a blood test, and that night I got a call from Johns Hopkins Hospital. Bring your brother there right away. And upon admitting him into the hospital, the doctor pulled me aside and said, listen, Billy's got cancer, and it's a type of cancer where there's virtually nothing we can do for him. And I remembered being absolutely devastated. Devastated, one, by the thought of losing the person that I probably loved the most in this entire world. But I think I was equally devastated by the reality. I was 29 years old, I was 7 years in the league, and I realized at that moment, my 18-year-old brother lying on his deathbed, with tears in his eyes, facing his own mortality, and all I had was these locker room speeches about suck it up, no pain, no gain, we'll get through this thing together. I was a socialized male that had separated my heart from my head and tried to deal with these emotions. I think I realized at that moment that everything I had invested my life in, this whole facade about who I was as a man, as an athlete, as a person, I recognized at that moment offered my brother no help or hope whatsoever. And I had a cot put in next to his bed. And I literally spent just about every night of an NFL season on that cot except for away games. So I get up in the morning, have breakfast with him, go to practice, come back, have dinner, and try to help him make it through the night. 5 months I spent on a pediatric oncology farm. 5 months in a waiting room with all these other families that had children facing life-threatening illnesses. And if you ever want to know where truth in America resides, where perspective and authentic community is, it's in that waiting room. Because in that waiting room, you suddenly get a clear perspective about what's really important in life. And you realize about all the secondary issues that eat up so much of our time and energy and create so much anxiety in our lives that matter for absolutely nothing. You had this tremendous sense of community. Because in that waiting room, you realize it wasn't just about my child on that floor. It was about all of our children. And when good news walked in that waiting room, some child's white cell count went up 10 points, everybody celebrated that. And when devastating news and death walked in that room, everybody tried to dissipate that as well. 5 months I was there, and then just before the last game of the season, I made a decision to bring my brother home so that he could die in the presence of the people that had loved and nurtured him. And I'll never forget wheeling him out of that hospital court, knowing he was going to an almost instant death. And I put him in my car and I drove over to Memorial Stadium where the Colts used to practice in Baltimore. And my teammates came out to the car and they lifted this defensive lineman that was probably about 110, 120 pounds. And they carried him into the locker room, and there I undressed him. And then we put him in the whirlpool. And one at a time, my teammates came up to him and in a clandestine way said goodbye. I took him home to my house in Baltimore and had his dog and his friends come down from Buffalo, and we celebrated this early Christmas, only to watch him die the next morning. 5 months to prepare for his death, but the reality and the finality was absolutely devastating to me. Took his body and flew it back up to Buffalo, and my teammates and coaches came at a turning point in my life. Standing in this cemetery, December 18th, snow blown, hundreds of people out here for this 18-year-old boy. And at the end of the ceremony, the priest said the final amen. And with that, everybody turned and just started to walk away. And I remember wanting to scream.
You mean this is it? You live, you have some good times, some bad times, you die, and then everybody gets on with the busyness of their own life? What's the meaning of life? Where does value and purpose come from? 29 years old, 7 years in the league, hit the long ball in that boy coat, athletically, sexually, and economically, and I had no concept. No concept what life was about, and no concept what I was about. And I started this long inward journey in the presence of Christ, trying to figure out what is the purpose and meaning in life. And ultimately my question became, what does it mean to be a man? And my conclusion is this: it boils down to two things and two things only. Now I know this not only from my own personal journey, but I've been in pastoral ministry for over 25 years, preaching a large multi-thousand church. And in my faith tradition, part of my job is to sit on the deathbed of dying people and help prepare them for the next stage of life, if you will. And I've done, I don't know how many funerals I've done in the last 25 years. But here's what I know to be true for me, and I know to be true for every single one of you. If you were on your deathbed today, knowing you were about to die tomorrow, and you want to measure what kind of success you had in life, what kind of man, what kind of woman you were, it comes down to two things and two things only. And the first is this: on your deathbed, you'll recognize that all of life is about relationships. It's about the capacity to love and to be loved. What's it mean to be a man? It means you can look somebody in the eye and say, I love you, and receive that love back. You know what the questions you ask at the end of your life? They're not about awards or achievements or applause or what you've accumulated. They're all questions of relationships. What kind of husband was I? What kind of wife? What kind of mother? What kind of father? What kind of son? What kind of daughter? What kind of friend? What kind of member of the community was I? Who did I love and who did I allow to love me? And when I walked through life and I saw people that were broken and hurt, who did I embrace and bring comfort and warmth to? And when life broke me, who did I allow to embrace me and bring comfort and healing to me as well? Now think about that for a moment. Think about how we raise boys in this country. There's not a man in this room that was raised to be relationally successful. We were taught how to compare and compete, which almost always destroys the opportunity for authentic community. You know what happens on that playground? 8- and 9-year-old boys, already socialized in America, already given the mandate to be a man. What we do is we walk around that playground and we police each other. And we want to find that one boy on the playground that's just a little too soft, too gentle, cries just a little too easy. And then all of us go up to that boy and we shame that boy. We tell that boy to stop acting that way. Stop with those tears. Don't be a sissy, some kind of mama's boy. Separate your heart from your head. Then as 8- and 9-year-old boys, we walk away from that thing thinking, my goodness, I hope that never happens to me. And we start building out this facade, this pretense of masculinity, in order to defend and deflect any questions of our own masculinity and manhood. And our hearts get separated from our head. It's all about relationships. Now you think what would happen in this community, boy, through men becoming healed and healthy, through mentoring of young people, teaching them that the epitome of being a man is relationship, through taking the world of sports and having coach mentors, teach boys all about relationship. What would happen if we ever raised a generation of boys that had their hearts connected to their heads? Boy, we're given the freedom to express their emotions, develop a vocabulary, and then you sent them back out to this community. And they used words like love and grace and mercy and acceptance, and whenever they saw the broken, the hurt, the marginalized, the bullied, the ostracized, boy, they understood that they had the capacity to embrace those people and bring them to the warmth of who and what they are as human beings. Boy, you would start changing this community. We would change this country. Boy, it's the essence of what Whitefield is all about. Now here's the second thing. To me, it's the only other thing. And again, if you were on your deathbed today, about to die tomorrow, want to measure what kind of success, what kind of man, what kind of woman you were, it comes down to this. At the end of your life, you want to be able to look back over life and know that you made a difference. You'll have some kind of mark, some kind of imprint that you were here and you left the world a little better place. See, all of us got to understand we have this responsibility to give back. We ought to have some kind of cause, some kind of purpose in our life that's bigger than who and what we are. It's a transcendent cause. Transcendent in the sense that you get up every day with more concerns than just your own personal goals, wants, and wants. And again, what would happen in a community like this? We ever raised a generation of boys and girls and taught them out of the essence and epitome of who they are as men and women is to have a cause, a purpose, and then release them into the community. And wherever they saw racism and poverty and anti-Semitism and all the isms that marginalize and minimalize human beings, they understood that out of the essence of who and what they are. Their job is to walk in the midst of that and demand that justice be done. Justice be done so that every man, woman, and child can live with the dignity of the status God has assigned to them. Boy, we need to raise a generation of men that can figure out how to be in community, come into the healing presence of Christ, figure out this responsibility that all of us have to build God's kingdom in this world, built on his love and acceptance for all human beings, based on his standards of righteousness and a demand of justice, to make sure that every person has an opportunity to participate in the fullest extent in this community. Well, we need your work, Leo. We need your work, Brennan. Well, we need to figure out how we support it and start getting men healthy. Healthy in a way that they figure out that the epitome of being a man, devoted husbands, committed fathers, contributed to this society. That's when the world starts to change. And then you think about, sports. Think about the role that coaches in sports have. If masculinity and femininity is about relationship and commitment to a cause, think about what a team is. A team is nothing more than a set of relationships for a cause. Every team has a common purpose, it has a performance goals and objectives, it has a mutually accountable work ethic, and it's always built on the trust, respect, and integrity of every team member. Boy, is there a better place to help boys become men and girls become women than in team sports, which is all about relationships, being dependable for their teammates and learning how to depend on others. It's all about commitment to a cause. Relationships, commitment to a cause. So what's coaching? Coaching is nothing more than helping young people develop the capacity to form and maintain relationships. Coaching is all about teaching young people how to bring their individual gifts and make a commitment to the goals and the purpose of that team. It's the ideal place. So when you think about what's the work being done here, taking men, bringing healing and wholeness into their lives, preparing them to be mentors, to lead a next generation of boys into some kind of authentic masculinity, to help reframe sports and use that for the betterment of society, boy, that's a home run in your community. But it takes a team in order to support or the goal and the purpose of Whitefield's team. So I'll close with this as kind of an ongoing gift. When you go home tonight, you go to your Google, go to a computer, go to like a Google search engine, and when you get there, put the number 100 in there, and then write greatest speeches. 100 greatest speeches. And that will take you to a site that has what it considers the 100 greatest speeches that have ever been recorded in English. And you can go there and you can listen to Winston Churchill leading a nation at war, a John F. Kennedy's inaugural address, 2 of Dr. Martin Luther King's speeches are there as well. And what these speeches do is they help keep you centered and focused in life. See, the problem in America is we live life at warp speed. There's almost no time built in to sit and contemplate and think about what we're doing. Think about who we are, what we stand for, who we stand with in this society, about our responsibility. Every one of these speeches will keep you centered and focused. And what you'll see is all 100 of the greatest speeches, they're they're all about two things. They're all about relationships. They're about our responsibility to other human beings locally and globally. We are our brothers and our sisters. We have this responsibility to other human beings. The second thing that every one of these speeches is about commitment to a cause, to make the world more fair and just, to build out God's kingdom on love, righteousness, and justice. And my favorite out of all of these speeches was given by Elie Wiesel. Elie Wiesel is a German concentration camp survivor. And when President Clinton was in the White House, he invited Wiesel to come speak to dignitaries from all over the world. And you can hear Wiesel come up to the microphone, and he lets the audience know that on the very next day would have been something like 47 years to the day since he had been liberated from a Nazi concentration camp by American soldiers. And while he had no English language at the time, he said he could look into the pupil of those soldiers' eyes and reflected back with all the horror, the misery that he had experienced. And Wiesel said, you know, the one hope that we had, the one hope that allowed us to try to live through the day, go to bed at night, and even think about getting up the next morning, was the hope and the belief that once the world found out what was happening to them, they expected that deliverance to come tomorrow or the next day or the day after that. And Wiesel said his greatest disappointment, almost surpassing the experience of a concentration camp, was to re-enter the world and to find out the world knew and did nothing about it. Wiesel said the greatest problem in the world is apathy and indifference. And whenever you're apathetic and indifferent to the plight and pain of other people all around you, that's always take sides with the oppressor, and it deepens the pain of the victim. Wiesel said, you know, the opposite of love is not hate. It's to be apathetic and unconcerned about the needs and pains of other people. The opposite of love is not hate, it's apathy and indifference. He said the opposite of faith is not heresy. It's to claim some kind of vertical connection to a higher power and then be totally disconnected from other people on the horizontal. Well, we are signs of hope, every single one of us in here. You think about the life of Christ. Christ's life was about two things. It was all about relationships. It was all about finding the marginalized, the ostracized, the person on the outside, and relationally connecting them, bring them to the inside. It was all about commitment to a cause. Well, what we need to do in Pittsburgh, in America, is to bring a generation of people, understand the relational responsibility to other human beings, and commit to building God's kingdom out. Or as I said in the beginning to Nick and Malcolm, I would say to each and every one of you, you're signs of hope. And the function of hope is to always keep present realities open for future possibilities. Boy, we live in a community and a nation with a tremendous number of people that need some kind of hope, some kind of hand, some kind of help to know that tomorrow can be different than today. And I'll close with this. The enemy of hope is always silence, accommodation to the world's values, and apathy and indifference. Boy, don't be apathetic and indifferent. Stand up as men and women. Speak out on behalf of others. Bring healing and wholeness into your own life so we can take this next generation and launch them to be men and women built for others. Thank you very much.